Well, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. My name is Cody Hanson. I'm the host of these monthly conversations with Singularity experts and alumni, covering a wide variety of topics. Today, we're going to dive deep into um, the biotech world and innovation ecosystems within biotech. And it's, as you'll learn, and as you probably already know, it's a very broad-ranging subject. So we'll cover a lot of ground, and I'm really excited to have Nadine here with us. To start, Nadine, I want to just give you a chance to kind of share an intro of yourself, of what it is you do right now in biotech, and kind of how you got to where you're at, what your story is, if you will.
Yeah, thank you, Cody. And I guess good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone here. It's very nice to be able to speak to such a wide audience from everywhere around the world. So really appreciate you being with us today. Um, my name is Nadine Bongaerts, pronounced in the Dutch way. I'm originally from the Netherlands and I developed my love for biotech during high school. I was probably biased by my mom, who was a biology teacher in high school. But I went a bit deeper, and when I really started to understand what kind of universe is within our bodies and our cells, I got incredibly inspired by developing technologies based on that knowledge. And in my studies at the TU Delft and University of Leiden, I worked on proof of concepts in bioremediation, biomaterials. Later, for my PhD, I went to Paris to work on drug discovery platform, and then moved into another application area when I joined cell-based meat company Gourmet that was working on the first cell-based foie gras, really pioneering that intersection of biotech and culinary sciences that we are really strong at here in France, where I am today. Uh, Now, throughout my studies and my work of developing biotech products, there's something that I really started to realize is that apart from developing all these technologies, we really need to understand our place in the wider ecosystem within society if we want to be successful in making an impact with these innovations. So, a lot of my time sometimes as a volunteer, sometimes as a professional, went into building communication strategies and building networks like Hello Tomorrow and iGEM to really align stakeholders. And I think also Singularity University is a really great initiative to bring together people from different disciplines, different sectors, in order to exchange and really get that conversation going of what kind of future we want to build.
So you've worked across R&D, regulatory strategy, commercialization in biotech. You have a kind of a wide-ranging perspective, I would say a fairly holistic perspective. What's your what are your thoughts on where biotech is today? Are we in like the golden age, the Cambrian explosion of biotech opportunity, or is it kind of stuck or in this kind of limbo period? What's your personal perspective or what you're seeing on where biotech is right now?
A bit of both, I think. You see that AI and automation have tremendous impact, especially on the R&D front, to accelerate the discovery of all sorts of new applications, but also insights into how biology works. And at the same time, we see that the investments have cooled down compared to a few years ago when we had COVID. Lots of investors were really excited about biotech. A lot of non-biotech investors that were not so familiar with the sector joined the space and got a bit of a reality check, I think. They started to understand how hard it is to innovate in biotech. Um, so there are a lot of layoffs in different biotech companies. Startups are closing down. So I think that some of the enthusiasm that we saw a few years ago has been reduced. But I would say it's also a bit of a healthy filtering a survival of the fittest moment where some biotech companies are actually able to get through this and show very robust signs, the good processes, have the right teams in place to get it to work. You still also need a bit of luck in biotech. That's what everyone says, and it's really true. Is even if you do it well, you still need that luck factor. But at the same time, I also think that there's so much opportunity. We're learning a lot from our mistakes. Um, and if you get the right strategy in place, looking at how fast science is advancing with all these new tools, I think that we're going to get out of this. So the winter of biotech is real, but definitely there's a lot of sun coming, I would say.
It sounds like maybe in that classic tech hype cycle where it spikes and then you're in the trough of disillusionment and the filtering of who were like the real players and who was just kind of in it for the hype, and then ideally a steady sustainable growth for the space from here on out. Is
Yeah.
that accurate? Do you think that that's true?
Yes, I think that's very much the case. You always have these hype cycles, and they're good on the one, and I think you there's a function to it. We saw it a lot also in the cell-based meat space, where there was a boom of cell-based meat companies. Now, many of them actually picked the wrong product. They went for example, a chicken nugget that cost a few dollars per kilo. Whereas I think Gourmet made the right bet to go for foie gras, which costs $300 per kilo. So then you're in a very different game. And with our strategy, we're realistically able to reach price parity much faster than some of the other companies that went to low price point products.
So looking at this kind of the state of the state right now, you hear biotechnology a lot, you hear synthetic biology a lot. What what's the difference between those two, and then what's genuinely new right now versus what's kind of just existing but just being rebranded?
Yeah, thank you for that question because it can get pretty confusing. Biotech is really the broad umbrella that basically covers everything from brewing beer to making insulin. Sometimes it involves genetic engineering. You hear the word GMO a lot, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes there are natural cells, natural bacteria, and natural yeast used for specific application that are not necessarily altered in terms of their genetics. Now, synthetic biology is a field that kind of popped up in the early 2000s, so it's not that old. And you could say that it's a subset of this biotech sector that is a lot more specific in its approach and mindset. So it often uses genetic engineering. Again, it's not always the case, but it really applies the engineering mindset to biology. Can we design, test, and scale something in a systematic ways using automation and standardized parts and computer design to build with biology and make biological systems or parts of biology that nature has not yet created itself. So it's like the next step in biotech. Um, it enables therefore also a new application space because we are better able at controlling biology.
I want to take a moment to mention for anyone who has questions for Nadine as you think of them throughout this webinar, we're going to dedicate the last 15-20 minutes to audience Q&A. So please drop those questions in the chat or in the Q&A. We have Mo from our team behind the scenes curating those, and we'll jump into those on the back half of this conversation. So as you think of them, drop those in the chat. But for now, we'll jump back into our questions here.
Maybe if I, sorry to
Go ahead.
interrupt you.
Go
If
ahead.
I could maybe add a little bit to what I was just saying, because um, when I often talk to people, they sometimes feel that biotech is very distant from
Hmm.
their daily life. That's uh, it sounds like something interesting, but how does it apply to me really? And what we need to understand is that every day you're using products of biotech, probably without even realizing. When I wake up in the morning, I take my contact lenses that were in a solution with enzymes produced by biotech. If I take my washed clothes and put them on for the day, the stains that probably my kids put on there all the time were removed by enzymes that were optimized to function at a very low temperature. So you don't have to put your washing machine at 60 degrees, but you can actually keep your clothes in a better shape and also help the environment because the enzymes work also at 20 or 30 degrees Celsius. When you take a vitamin or supplement, often these molecules are produced with bacteria and big bioreactors. So we have many encounters with biotech, but we don't always label them. They are just
Hmm.
functional products. And so what's very interesting is that now with synthetic biology, we can take it a step further. We will see new versions of these products that are even more advanced, even more personalized. And that's something I find super exciting.
Diving into that a little bit, we talk at Singularity a lot about like possible futures, right? So no one knows really what's going to happen, and that gets harder to predict by the year as exponential technologies converge and get faster and faster. But with trying to extrapolate out here with the synthetic biology coming online and biotech becoming more ubiquitous, where do you see those products and services expanding in our lives? I think that's something that's hard for a lot of folks to kind of imagine. It's hard for me to try to figure out. It's like that makes sense. The contact solution, the laundry detergent, all that makes sense. In 5 years, 10 years, where is biotech playing in our lives where it's not currently?
I think the drug that you get may not be the same as what I would get. You will get, and you already see that, but increasingly, you will have personalized therapies that are based specifically on your genetic makeup. So you get a DNA scan, and you get an mRNA vaccine that exactly matches that requirement that you need. Um, so that's one thing. Uh, More on the material side, the chemical side, I'm really excited by seeing enormous amounts of research and also already industrial applications towards microorganisms that take CO2 and waste materials, so um, waste streams from industry, for example, that is then turned into drugs or valuable compounds or bulk chemicals. Um, so really creating a new type of circular economy there. Um, I would love to see biodegradable alternatives to things like plastics and PFAS, um, and enzymes that clean up all our medicine in our water or other toxins that are now difficult to remove. Um, so I see a much cleaner world actually. If I extrapolate all these applications, I can really see how um, we can make our healthcare more personalized on the one hand and our planet a lot more renewable.
Yeah, it's I think that's a really interesting point, and it's something that you talk about. Tiffany Vora, one of our other biotech experts, talks about it a lot of biotech being a platform technology, not necessarily just a vertical, right? Like it's going to impact kind of a broad variety of things from healthcare to materials. Um, and in the most optimistic sense, maybe it's the thing that helps us clean up ourselves and our planet in the wake of some other industrialization, other parts of the economy that are moving us forward, but also causing some damage. Maybe that can be part of how biotech helps. Um, Jumping into the forces that are going to make all of this happen. You've said that, the real biotech bottleneck isn't R&D anymore, that R&D is moving faster and faster in the research institutions of the world with scientists, but it's more infrastructure and regulation. Can you share a little bit about what you mean by that? What specific infrastructure gaps are holding back commercialization of biotech solutions right now?
So yeah, on the R&D front, it's I would say it's still hard. Like, it's not. Um, we would like to say that biology is programmable, but it's still very difficult to get biology to really work the way you want it. So that's one thing. But I do see that this is accelerating, and
Hmm.
um, I think in the end there are some barriers on the regulatory front and on the infrastructure front that we need to really think about, because um, putting a food biotech product on the market, for example, takes a couple of years. Now in Europe, that's 5 years. In the US, it's 2 years, so it's a lot, or 1 to 2 years, so that's a lot shorter. Um, but especially in Europe, the uncertainty of that timeline is killing innovation at the moment. So you see a lot of the startups here uh, having a US first strategy because it's so difficult to get your product on the market. As a startup, you've invested many years into the R&D, and then all your investors also expect you to get as fast as possible to market. So we need to improve the efficiency on that front. Things are moving in a good direction, I would say, and the situation is also not the same um, for all biotech products. So food is a very specific one, but also medical inventions and drugs are typically very difficult because you need to go through all the clinical trials, and there a lot of the drugs fail. There's a very small percentage of drugs that actually reaches the patients in the end. So there's uh, even if all the R&D works out, what I want to say is that there's this big regulatory barrier to overcome. Then on the infrastructure, this applies more for industrial biotech products. At one point, you need to make the shift from having a pilot scale production that works to a large factory. Now, when you work on a product for which the market is uncertain, for which it's not very clear if the consumer wants it, it's a huge investment to build that infrastructure. For a startup company, that's a big risk. And obviously, all the investors are not necessarily jumping to spend their money on building that type of infrastructure. So if we want to go through this uh, new bioeconomy where we really want to augment the amount of bioproducts on the market to improve our economy and sustainability and resilience, I would say, because I think one thing that is really interesting about biotech is the fact that you can decentralize the production of a chemical, for example, that you don't need to harvest from a plant in some country that is far away, but you can now do the same in-house in a bioreactor. Yet that infrastructure is a big a, a big expense that cannot be only covered by investors. It really requires also public funding and a vision from a nation or continent to say, okay, we are going to invest in building that infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people kind of forget is like even really early Silicon Valley, um, pre-venture days was a lot of it was funded by government grants
Mm.
from the US government. And so I think public funding plays a really important role when things are still too early or too risky for private capital to make economic sense.
Yeah.
Governments can take those risks, and so there's a lot of opportunity there, and I hope that some governments are starting to see that opportunity in biotech and willing to invest in that. Um, what do you think? I mean, there's a million ways this could go, right? But what do you think are some of the solutions to get over those commercialization hurdles? I mean, one idea that I just take from tech is an incubator or an accelerator, or like, you hear about robotics labs. Is there like a biotech startup lab where there's one organization that invests in all of that kind of the facility and manufacturing that many startups can use? Is that a solution? What are some of the other thoughts that you've had or run into from others that could help accelerate this?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you see increasingly are initiatives like biofoundries. These are service platforms with robotics and where basically you can automate the construction of different organisms. So usually you don't build one organism for a specific application. You build, let's say, I want to produce um, a bacterium that can give me um, that can produce a certain enzyme, and I don't know, it doesn't matter what it is, like an enzyme that degrades a pollutant. But I want a lot of that enzyme very efficiently. So I need a cell that is a super factory to produce that. Then I'm going to make some genetic designs. I'm going to test all these genetic designs, and I'm going to select the cell that is the best at manufacturing that enzyme. But that requires thousands of experiments. And the more you can do, the higher the chance that you have a candidate that is very successful at performing the task that you wanted to perform. Now, especially as a startup, you don't necessarily want to build all that infrastructure. So being able to leverage that from a platform like that, from a biofoundry is very interesting. And that's something that those biofoundries are popping up everywhere around the world. Recently, one in Paris was also established. And then I would say the next step, more on the pilot stage, you also see increasingly infrastructure being built to facilitate that transition from lab to trying it in a larger bioreactor and seeing how the organism that you selected in the lab then performs at a larger industrial scale as a sort of in-between step before you make the decision to really go big with your plant.
Right. I mean, ideally, you're innovating quickly and affordably and testing, product market fit essentially, right, before you make the major capital investments to go
Yeah.
scale. Um, where in the world you mentioned that there's a biofoundry that popped up in Paris. Where are kind of the hotspots globally that you're seeing where some of this stuff is happening?
I think still for biotech, Boston and San Francisco are globally best places for biotech. I see a lot also in the UK. I think the UK is very strong on that front. And for the past 10 years, I've been living in Paris. I see a lot of development also in France. Um, so yeah, it's hard to say. I'm less aware of what's going on in Asia, but I know that China has a real big vision on biotech. And I was so I'm actually in the office right now of iGEM, which is the largest synthetic biology competition um, for synthetic biology in the world. I do actually a project with them on in getting the involvement from the industry with all the activities that they're doing for students and young entrepreneurs. And last month we organized a big event with 5,000 people from everywhere around the world, and you could really see from the distribution of participants where SynBio was a big deal. Many participants from Asia and especially China. So I think that there's a lot of interest and investment coming from these regions. Um, it varies, but there is a realization everywhere around the world that we need that technology to build resilient supply chains, and I think that's one of the big motivations now to
Hmm.
invest.
And we'll share a link to that organization in the follow-up email, and it links to any other resources that we mentioned here. Um, Going back into regulation, you have a unique experience that at Gourmet you led the first ever EU regulatory submission for cultivated meat. Um, what did that experience teach you about the regulatory infrastructure and environment? Maybe what surprised you, and how did you overcome some of the hurdles you ran into there?
That was a very interesting experience because cell-based meat specifically had no rules of the game really when we applied. Um, uh, Perhaps a very quick explanation on what we actually did, because um, on the one hand we took a process that comes from biopharma and the manufacturing of vaccines using cells, so all of that upstream methodology is actually taken from biopharma, but at the same time these cells, they're used as a main ingredient for making a food. And so we were somewhere in between what you would normally do for safety in a biopharma process, but then we're going to eat it. So we had to apply to food regulation in the end. So that was a very creative process, and even the regulators themselves tried to understand how to actually regulate that. And so in my experience, it was a very creative process. The interaction with the regulators was very interesting because they also got their experts on board, and we had very scientific conversations about what would be needed to prove the safety of such a product. And we often got out of these conversations feeling inspired to know, okay, what tests to do and how to improve some of our processes. So I actually had very positive experiences, um, especially with the U.S. regulators and regulators in Singapore. Um, in Europe, the situation is also improving. There is a lot more. There's a lot of interest, and also in learning from each other. And so I think that's the way forward. That companies and regulators really team up and work together to understand how we deal with such innovative products. Um, um,
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
guess at the same time, the unpredictability on the timeline is was the hard part. I
hmm
think that despite these very positive conversations, not knowing exactly when you could expect what, that's very tough for a company that has a runway that is eaten up every month, and
for sure. When your investors are calling you asking, what go-to-market looks like, and there's just no real answer.
that's the thing.
Um, I think that's a really good point, especially with an industry like in the stage that biotech is in right now, or SynBio is. I think a lot of people have, myself included, have a perspective of like regulators are you go fill out an application or something and check some boxes and it's very transactional. But in this case, um, this is very creative and partnership based. And I think in a lot of cases, the regulators want to figure this out as well. And so that's a kind of a frame of mind shift for anyone in this space, I think is treating that relationship more like almost like a business partnership um, that takes back and forth and takes creative solutions versus just kind of like checking the boxes, filling out an application, paying a fee, and hoping for the best. But then to your point, the timelines are very challenging, and so there's maybe there are go-to-market solutions there too, where there are ways to start to gain market traction in a lower regulatory kind of method while you work on regulation for maybe those more advanced products. Maybe that's not relevant to you, but I think there's going to have to be creative solutions to bridge that gap. Um, Another major challenge in the space that you've mentioned is kind of a talent paradox where there's not necessarily enough people to bridge the gap between lab and factory. And I think you're talking about the actual employees who are the people who are working in these bio labs and factories. Can you explain more about what that gap is and kind of where maybe there's a solution?
Yeah. Yeah, the challenges are on multiple fronts. I think one aspect here is the way we raise our academic scientists is not always compatible with the real world.
Hmm.
So in academia, you do science to get your name on publications, and um, you don't necessarily um, work towards building a product or a production process that needs to be robust and repetitive and stable. Um, you don't necessarily work in a highly interdisciplinary team where people don't speak the same language, or you don't understand necessarily how an investor looks at what you are doing. So having people that understand how to do science in that specific context is can be challenging and takes a bit of a time and a learning process. At the same time, when you're early company and you want to do something highly innovative, you also very much benefit from people in academia because what they're really great at is creating something from nothing and being very visionary and highly creative with the science. So you need to develop your team and you need to really help them grow into a new type of mindset. So still keeping that scientific creativity, but helping them to understand the new context. Um, and also what's that their project is not necessarily their project, and this can be very tough because as a
Mm.
scientist you feel like it's your baby, like you spend so many years, and then all of a sudden the company may need to make a shift, and that project may get cancelled, or that project may not go fast enough, and not even because you did the wrong thing, but because that's just the reality of how we need to move forward. So that's they do, yeah, on the talent development, and especially in academia, I think we can do some work. Now on the transition from the lab to the industry, what's missing for me at least is people that are really good at helping in that in between phase where you are uh, moving into pilot stage, and where you still have a lot of trial and error to be done, a lot of creative work to be done. Nothing is necessarily streamlined. So you're not in a large factory or a large company where everything is very structured. It's still very much hands-on and lots of parts moving at the same time. But you still want that experience. You still want someone that understand how the industry should work. And finding people that are really excellent in that interface and that in between state is very difficult.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and then just simply very concretely, people that are good with bioreactors, they're hard to find. Uh, it's called bioprocess engineering, and there is a big ask for people who know how to work and build bioprocesses in a very efficient way. So um, if you're planning your biotech career, definitely an interesting field to explore. But yeah, so there is a new type of talent pool needed, and I'm also thinking about that future that we just envisioned in a couple of years from now. Think about all the technical people, the plumbers, the people that build the machines, that also need to kind of specialize into this area.
Hmm.
I think that there's a big talent pool, not necessarily that are just hardcore engineers and very, yeah, very practical people that we would need uh, to enable this future.
So likely a good amount of reskilling, not necessarily like there probably should be more, I assume, university programs for this space, but there's a waiting period to that to get those folks through school and into this space, and so then maybe there's opportunity to kind of bridge that gap with reskilling from other spaces or what have you. And then it sounds like there's also opportunity in um, for innovation leaders, whether they're corporate innovation or they're startup founders, to go and partner with academics and kind of guide each other on doing the innovation work, but also doing the science and ideally being able to work together and you know achieve a good outcome without egos getting in the way and all that kind of fun stuff. So um, it sounds like there's an incredible amount of opportunity for the folks who can figure that out, and not to say that it would be easy to figure out, but that it is possible. And it sounds like there's a path there.
Yeah, I mean, good connections between industry and academia. Um, uh, Opening up, like being aware of new career paths in schools where they train technical people. These are great ways, I think, to get more exposure to what's coming next and the type of future that many of the startups I see around me are building today.
Going into the consumer and finding that product market fit. I know you've mentioned that it's consumer trust that will probably decide, a lot of what happens with biotech versus just the pure technology. So it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, an academic can do some incredible technology, but if the market isn't ready for it, then the business economics don't work out. What are your thoughts on you know, building consumer trust and any barriers that you're seeing right now?
Yeah, so I need to be a little more specific here. That's a very bold statement. I think it depends. So for biotech products where the end user is the consumer, so not a physician or an industrial buyer, I think trust is probably a rate limiting step.
Okay.
So the science today is advancing so much faster than public understanding and acceptance. I think that this is a challenge, especially for food. Um, for industrial biotech, for example, if you produce a chemical or you an enzymatic process to replace a chemical one in industry, this plays much less a role. Then there has to be an economic benefit. It's more about, can you scale this and can you create a price point that is interesting commercially. And in pharma, usually the patient, if they have a severe disease, they are waiting for a new drug to come on the market. So it's more the regulation and the pricing of the drugs and the willingness to pay for that. That is a rate limiting step, less than the trust of the end user. Um, but it's true. I mean, I think a lot of people are probably uh, uh, yeah, I mean, people are scared sometimes for long-term effects or afraid that something is not natural.
Hmm.
They may feel that it's culturally or morally wrong. Some are afraid of the power of a certain company and how it
Right.
neglects other stakeholders in society. So it's yeah, the trust part is a very important important one, but it depends a little bit on the category that we're talking about.
Um, Going into the investment opportunity, I know you work with a lot of investors and a variety of companies in your current work. Um, and I want to speak to this from an actual investor's perspective, but also uh, a startup founder or even a corporate innovation leader who wants to dive into biotech. Anyone who's kind of thinking about investing time or money into this space. What are some of the most common blind spots that you see when people are thinking about, let's make the dive into biotech because it still I think is a kind of a big scary jump to make compared to something like, you know, AI is everywhere, right? It's an easy jump to make, but maybe the main opportunity is already past. I think the main opportunity in biotech is in our future, and so there's an incredible amount of opportunity there, but it's a more challenging jump. And so what are some blind spots that you're seeing there?
It's mostly, especially if you're investing in the early stage companies, then it might be, I mean, there might be a very attractive set of data that looks very promising, but that lab proof of principle, proof of concept might not translate in exactly the same way at a larger scale. Or when it's a drug, the fact that you have great in vitro data, so data from the lab tested on cells, doesn't necessarily mean that it may actually work in the patient. So there is a big gap still, and a big risk between anything that you get in the early stage, um, compared to what you may end up getting once you're really getting closer to commercialization. That's one thing. The second is regulatory timelines. I already spoke about that. Those can be very uncertain. So of course, if you look at the optimum timeline, I think you always need to add some time to it, because you simply don't know what to expect. And then the third one, something that should get more attention, is the political situation. So in cell-based meat, for example, we've seen that states in the US started to ban the production of cell-based meat. So even with your FDA approval, you
Mm.
may not be able to get your product on the market because of that. Uh, these are things that we don't necessarily pay attention to when we evaluate a startup. You know, you look at the team, you look at the IP, you look at the technology. But I think having at least some understanding of these other factors will give you a much broader and better perspective of what could happen with this company. And doesn't mean that you should be super disencouraged to invest, but I think it would be good that the company at least has a strategy and has some sort of way to um, um, de-risk certain situations if they are really crucial for the success of the company.
I want to take a moment to dive into some of the audience questions here. We have a good variety from tactical to kind of very high level. The first one, uh, I'm curious to hear your response to this. It's very singularity. What do you think will be the next breakthrough in terms of human machine interfaces, in terms of biotechnology, if we can program cells and interface with neurosignals? Where do you see the first meaningful convergence between synthetic biology and human machine integration, and what infrastructure is missing to make that convergence safe and scalable?
That's a very interesting one. I believe one area to look at there is optogenetics. So optogenetics is the ability to influence the behavior of cells with light. And cells can be engineered with photosensitive receptors that then trigger a certain behavior. So for example, in mice, they've been able to implant a device that would then be um, triggered by light, and the neurons with light sensitive receptors would be specifically activated. And this can be used, for example, in Parkinson's disease or other types of neurodegenerative diseases. So you could imagine that um, interfaces like that can influence our brain behavior. Now, I don't know exactly how that would translate immediately to what the audience what the audience is asking here. Is it more to interact with a machine? I guess so, right? It's
I think
because
it,
then you
yeah,
also need the feedback from the brain back to the machine. Um, I would need to think about that, to be honest.
maybe we can fo follow up with that. Yeah, I think just human
Yeah,
machine integration in general, which is a very sci-fi question, but maybe not as sci-fi as we think it is today. I mean, maybe, well, I mean, you already see the things with like BCIs, implants and things technically being this integration, but that I think is more of a computer-based approach, whereas I think this question is more of like what's the biology-based approach to this. I know there's also some stuff going on with like using fungi for compute, even using organic materials for data storage. And so there's some interesting things right now that I seem random and maybe even goofy, but could have broader implications down the line. So
definitely. And that interaction between electronics and biology is increasingly present. And there's also you see initiatives to engineer bacteria that um, when they are exposed to a certain biomarker, for example, emit a green fluorescent protein, and that fluorescence is then detected by the electronic device, and the electronic device sends a signal to your phone. So you see these type of interactions appearing increasingly. That I think that, yeah, the next step would be to make a device that picks up signals from the brain and translates that back to whatever machine you're interacting with. I think I can see how this is possible. Um, I don't know exactly what Neuralink is doing, but I think they're probably the closest, right, to achieving something in that direction.
mhm.
It's not my
uh,
specialty of applications.
yeah, well, we can jump into the next question here, which is around commercialization. Have you, and I think you could take this question a couple of different ways, so interpret it how you will, but have you considered or worked with an intellectual property strategy when commercializing, and could it apply to these types of biotech developments? And I think a broader question is just how does intellectual property play into this space?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's hugely important. It's very, very important to have an IP strategy. Um, the timelines are so long that you need that protection also for investors to feel secure in what you're doing. And you need to be extremely, like, it's not one technology that you're building. It's often a combination of critical technologies that give you the combined competitive advantage over others. Um, it's a lot of technology stacking that you typically see. And I think one very interesting development in when it comes to IP is everything that's happening right now with AI and protein engineering, and the fact that AI can imagine so many variants around specific innovations requires you to also take into account that um, your innovation needs to have a broad protection around it, because otherwise AI can probably easily crack your patent. So
Hmm.
you need to be really smart about your IP today. I have seen companies even that um, follow a slightly different strategy. So they actually follow more of a secretive approach on some aspects because they are afraid that they would otherwise be copied too easily.
Right, stay in full stealth for as long as possible.
There's different ways, but yeah, I think you need
Mm,
probably a combination of both.
hmm
Some parts you need to keep secret, but some technologies that you cannot keep secret and absolutely needs to be protected.
We have a question here on paths to market, and this is an interesting one because we just last month had a founder on who spoke directly to this, but it says pharmaceuticals are difficult to register, but probiotics, other nutraceuticals don't require as much regulation and testing. Is that a viable route that the biotech world can take? And I'll add to this of like, where is that viable compared to like where do you just kind of have to bite the bullet and go fully into the regulatory system?
This often depends on whether you want to put medical claims on it or not. So if you have a probiotic and you don't claim that it improves your gut health, then uh, it's more easy
Hmm
to get it to the market than if you really want to kind of sell it as a drug that improves um, an issue. So that's the difference. And you could even try kind of a dual strategy. You first put it on the market without that claim, and then work out um, the approval until you have it, and you add it to your label later
Right.
on.
And the example that I was referencing is Zach from Z Biotics, who they did go the probiotic nutraceutical route. And the irony is that if they do studies, they can't publish them because they can't. Once they state that there is um, a benefit like that in an official way, then they have to be regulated as a drug. And so it's like
Yeah,
kind of a catch 22. And they basically have relied on user testimonials to gain market share. And so that's totally, I think, an option. And its success will depend on kind of how you play it and essentially how you do your marketing. But I think the dual strategy piece is really interesting as well. Um, this next question, what is the role of outsourced service providers, contract research, contract manufacturing in accelerating biotech innovation, particularly in bridging that gap from small scale to larger scale manufacturing?
yeah, that's a very great question, and something we struggled with a lot, um, because it's not always obvious. When you for example, transfer the manufacturing to a contractor, you still need to transfer your know-how to that third party. And when you are still trying to figure out how it all works, then training someone else on how you actually want them to manufacture it is not so straightforward.
Hmm
So it can be done, but sometimes it's also nice if you have your in-house capability because you can do faster iteration cycles. So that's the advantage of having everything in-house. You have all your teams together. So um, if let's say you want to manufacture something at a larger scale, your R&D is next door. You know that just makes it a lot more smooth. Um, but the downside is, of course, that you need to invest in that expertise and that infrastructure. Uh, in in for products that are very novel and require very specific types of equipment, it's also harder to find a contractor compared to, let's say, fermentation based processes that use microbes that have been already used for many many years. It's pretty standardized, so in that scenario it makes a lot of sense to directly go with a contractor. For things like cell-based meat, it's harder. I wouldn't
hmm
say it cannot be done, but it's definitely less straightforward.
Right. Uh, Jumping back into our, I have a couple of, I think, great wrap-up questions. We have a few minutes left here. So I want to look toward the future of like, the ideal scenario. Fast forward 10 years, the biorevolution is fully underway. in your mind or in the best possible future, what has changed from today to then? And what did we get right about building these ecosystems to make this all a possibility?
Yeah. So on the outcome, I hope that biotech has restored the planet, at least for a significant part. Um, on the practical side, we would have ecosystems that allow for experimentation in the real world. So, regulatory sandboxes that kind of bridge the gap between the company and the product on the market. So, something that allows you to interact with the final end user more quickly. We have our talent pool set up. We have cheaper feedstocks, better supply chains, massive expansion of our bioreactor capacity. And we have sufficient capital not only for R&D, but also for all the infrastructure around it. Um, and yeah, that way, I think we have a functional bioeconomy that should be able to give us a completely different type of healthcare, different nature even. I hope to see more nature and more bioreactors because we can regrow a lot of the land that we first needed
Hmm.
to produce all the products that we're using today. So
Yeah,
it's different world.
that would be amazing. The final question here for executives, entrepreneurs, investors listening to this, what's the one thing that you want them to walk away thinking about differently than when they came in? What action or mindset shift would you most like to see? And I think that's for someone who's already in this space, but also someone who's not and curious about the space.
So for someone who's already in the space, always put yourself in the bigger picture and get in touch with the real world and try to really understand your place in the ecosystem and make the connections with the different stakeholders around you. Don't stick with your tech tunnel vision only. For people who are new, we need you. We need you to be a part of this. It's a big shift that we need to make, and we need everyone. We need everyone to join this field, and I think that's really exciting about synthetic biology. It has brought in so many different people, from designers to artists to industrials. I see companies like the North Face experimenting with Spiber, a company in Japan that produces a spider silk material. I see one, it's a shoe company now working with LanzaTech on making a material for the sole of the shoe that is made by microbes based on CO2. Uh, L'Oreal has put out a massive statement that they want most of their ingredients to be green and bio-based by 2030, and they're working with company Abolis here in Paris to make those bio-based ingredients, replacing also a lot of the unsustainable ones that are currently used in many of our cosmetics. Um, so we need to experiment together.
Hmm.
We need to work with the industries that where biology potentially has an impact. Um, Innovators also need to understand the requirements of what they expect from a material. If they want to like, what does it have to do? What is the strength? What is the strength? What is um, the volume that is required? Like, we need to have a lot of conversations to really understand how innovators can adjust to the industry requirements and the other way around.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's lots of work to be done. Uh, get involved with startups, I would say. Look at what they're doing. There's Synbiobeta also in San Francisco doing great events on showcasing new biotech innovations. There's Singularity. You had a Future in Biotech program recently. Um, the more we learn, the more we interact. I'm really sure that from these interactions, we'll be able to create new ways of working.
Amazing. I think that's a great place to end it off. I think you've highlighted there's an incredible amount of opportunity here. I think the roadmap isn't super clear yet. But I think that's where the opportunity lies. I think if you wait for the roadmap instead of going and building it, then you miss a big chunk of what that opportunity is. So I really want to thank you for your time. I want to thank everyone for being here. We are out of time for today, but this has been a great conversation. I appreciate your questions, and I'm really excited for what the next 10 years brings in this space. And I hope that everyone here plays some role in it. As Nadine said, we need everyone, and so kind of a call to arms on this part of the technology ecosystem. And I will send an email out to everyone who registered with the recording, as well as a list of resources. You mentioned a couple of ecosystems and things here. And so we'll pull together a list of resources for so you can dive deeper. I do want to mention that we do have the recordings from that Future of Biotech program from earlier this year. I'll share a link to that. We're also actually working on kind of a biotech essentials mini course that you can dive deeper into. So all that will come in the follow-up email. But thank you for being here, and thanks Nadine for your insights. And looking forward to what happens in biotech and synbio over the next 5, 10 years.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone for joining in.
All right, thanks all.
Bye bye.
Have a great one.